Back in 2026, the world was holding its breath, right on the edge of a truly catastrophic war. For 50 incredibly tense days, a conflict between the US and Iran was threatening to just completely spiral out of control. So today we're going to break down exactly how it happened and, just how close we all came to falling into the abyss.
I mean, just imagine this message, not in a history book, but popping up on your phone screen, coming directly from the most powerful person in the world. On April 7th, 2026, President Trump sent this out, and with it, he set this absolutely terrifying deadline for Iran. The world, well, it quite literally held its breath.
So you can imagine, right? World leaders were just floored. A lot of them were convinced this was the prelude to a massive attack, maybe even a nuclear one. Which, of course, brings us to the big question here. How on earth did we get to this point? How did the world find itself teetering on the brink of total war in just 50 days?
Okay, so to really get how we reached that terrifying deadline, we've got to rewind and go back to the beginning. Let's start with what was really at stake in this conflict. I'm talking about the immediate human cost.
Think about this. In just 50 days, this conflict claimed over 4,000 lives. And that's soldiers and civilians in Iran, Lebanon, Israel, and America. But behind a number like that, you've got thousands of shattered families and millions of people forced to flee their homes.
But believe it or not, the human toll could have been so much worse. The war really escalated in a huge way when Iran's nuclear facilities became targets. Just look at the Bushehr plant. It was hit 4 separate times. Now this thing is sitting right on the coast, packed with tons of nuclear material. A direct hit could have triggered a Chernobyl-level disaster right there in the Gulf. I mean, Qatar's prime minister had warned just a year before that it would mean, and I'm quoting here, no water, no fish, no life, for generations.
So, the question is, how did things spiral out of control so fast? Well, to really understand that, we need to walk through the timeline, step by dangerous step.
Okay, so the war kicks off on February 28th. Less than a month later, March 21st, the stakes get raised a lot, with an attack on the Natanz nuclear facility. But the real game changer, the moment that just completely flipped the script for both sides, that happened on April 3rd.
See, up until that moment, President Trump was projecting this image of absolute confidence. He was claiming total American air dominance over Iran. He basically declared the war was, for all intents and purposes, already over.
And then, everything changed. On April 3rd, that whole narrative of American air superiority just shattered. Iran managed to shoot down a highly sophisticated F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jet, and just like that, the entire game had changed.
Now, this one event didn't just change the military math here. Oh no, it kicked off one of the most dramatic special operations of the entire crisis, a super high-stakes rescue mission deep inside enemy territory.
So the downing of that F-15E, it triggered an immediate crisis. You had 2 crew members who ejected over Iran. One was picked up pretty quickly, but the other one was missing, deep behind enemy lines. What happened next was a real race against time. First up, the CIA launched this whole deception campaign, putting out false information to throw the Iranians off the scent. Then, once they got intel pinpointing the airman's exact location, an elite team of Delta Force and Navy SEALs went in. After a super tense 24 hours on the ground, they pulled it off. The extraction was a success.
And so 2 days later, on April 5th, President Trump announces the success of the mission with this simple, triumphant message. We got him. And he added that it was a totally flawless operation, conducted without any damage at all.
But flawless wasn't exactly the reality on the ground. Not even close. I mean, yes, the airman was saved, which is incredible. But that mission came at a really steep price. The original F-15E was gone. An A-10 Warthog that was providing support crashed. 2 Black Hawk helicopters took on heavy fire. And get this, 2 transport aircraft were so badly damaged they had to be destroyed right there on site.
All right, so with the military costs obviously piling up and geopolitical tensions just at an absolute peak, the focus started to shift away from the battlefield and over to the negotiating table. But as you're about to see, that path was every bit as chaotic.
President Trump had already issued multiple deadlines for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And you got to remember, this is a critical choke point for like a third of the world's sea-traded oil. But Iran ignored every single deadline. So in response, his rhetoric just got more and more unconventional, building up to this post, where he also threatened to completely wipe out Iran's power grid and infrastructure.
So everyone was just bracing for a massive U.S. strike. The whole world was watching. But then, and get this, with just 90 minutes left on the clock before Trump's final deadline, this absolutely stunning announcement comes out of Islamabad. A 2-week ceasefire had been unexpectedly brokered by Pakistan. No one saw that coming.
So peace talks kick off in Islamabad, but they completely fall apart after just 21 hours. And the reason why is pretty simple, really. The two sides were just miles apart. You can see it right here. The US was demanding that Iran completely dismantled its entire nuclear program, period. But Iran, they would only agree to suspend their nuclear activity for 5 years. That's a gap you just can't bridge.
So with the peace talks totally dead, the situation back at the Strait of Hormuz, that vital artery for the global economy, just descended into absolute chaos. The U.S. starts a naval blockade of Iranian ports, and Iran's response was all over the place. One day they'd announce the strait was open, the next they'd slam it shut again. Then things got really dangerous when Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces actually started firing on civilian merchant ships.
Yeah, this was no longer just some regional conflict. The chaos happening in the Gulf was creating this really fragile, unresolved global crisis. It was threatening international trade, global security, the whole shebang.
And in the middle of all this chaos, you had American diplomats basically racing around trying to put out other fires in the region. And they did manage to broker a fragile 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, who, remember, is a key Iranian proxy. It was a small diplomatic win, for sure, but it was absolutely critical to stop a second front from opening up as that main deadline got closer and closer.
Which brings us right back to the final, terrifying question. That 2-week ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran? It was set to expire on April 22nd. The peace talks had completely failed. A naval blockade was in effect. A diplomatic solution looked pretty much impossible, and the clock was ticking all the way down. So, what happens next?